for almost 1,500 years in the life of the church, fasting was a regular routine and habit and practice of the church. Listen to the teaching of Jesus himself in his most acclaimed teaching ever, the Sermon on the Mount. It's supposed to be his greatest discourse, people say. But Matthew chapter 6, Jesus is talking about fasting. And he tells the people this, hey, when you fast, don't make it obvious, as the hypocrites do. For they try to look miserable and disheveled, so people will admire them for their fasting. I tell you the truth, that is the only reward they will ever get. So we'll pause right there. Jesus says, listen, whenever you do fast, there's certain people who fast for the wrong reasons. It's because they want everybody to pat them on the back and say, oh, you're so spiritual, you're so great. And Jesus says, if you do it for that reason, that motive, God knows, and that's the only reward you're going to ever get is from those people, right? But he says, however, if you don't do it for that reason, when you fast, comb your hair and wash your face, then no one will notice that you are fasting except your Father who knows what you do in private. And your Father who sees everything will reward you. So Jesus here is teaching on fasting, and he says a couple of interesting things. Jesus says, first and foremost, when you fast. So it seems that Jesus is implying that his expectation of his disciples and followers is that they fast. It's just kind of like a built-in, right? This is what it means to follow me and know me. When you fast. He didn't say if you fast or if you decide to fast. He says when you fast. Beyond that, Jesus says when you fast, there's a payoff. When you fast, the Father will reward you. So there's a purpose and a benefit to fasting, meaning that there is a gift from God on the other side of fasting, on the other side of going through this process of fasting. And so Jesus says, listen, when you fast, the Father will reward you, so long as you do it for that reason, right? Not for the praise of other people. Now, as I read this passage from Jesus about fasting, I thought it was really fascinating, some of the things that he said. But one of the things that when I was reading kind of worried me was he said, when you fast, comb your hair. I thought, I can wash my face. I can fast. Jesus, I can't comb my hair. I don't really have anything to comb, brother. I think Jesus understands. But Jesus says, when you fast, the Father will reward you. But as I shared earlier, most followers of Jesus in the West, we do not fast as a norm. But here's something important to think about. We used to. Let me I just want to give you a brief history of fasting so you can say, okay, there's actually something to tap into here that isn't just some weird or some random thing. No, there's actually an ancient practice that's been happening for a very long time, and I want to kind of clue you into some of the things that have been happening down through the history of God's people, and how it is, in fact, that many believers through history, even today, there's many believers in the eastern part of the world, right? The eastern church, if you will, who actually are practicing fasting. Every major religion just about practices fasting. So whether that's Judaism or Islam or Hinduism or Buddhism and others, all of these practice fasting in one form or another. However, the first mention of fasting as a spiritual discipline appears in the book of Exodus, in the life of Moses. As Moses is out on Mount Sinai, the scripture says that he did one of those crazy long fasts, 40 days on Mount Sinai. And after that, it's followed by this command from God for all of Israel, right? The people of God in the Old Testament, that they would fast on the Day of Atonement, or what's also known as Yom Kippur right now, right? So there's Moses fasting. Then there's this command for the people of God to fast on that day. And then there are stories all throughout the Old Testament where the people of God are fasting for various reasons. In fact, basically almost every major character in the Old Testament fasts. Moses fasted. David fasted. Samuel fasted. Esther fasted. The prophets fasted. And by the time you come to the life of Jesus and the people of God in Jesus' day, fasting for the Jewish people was a common practice where they would fast 2 days a week from the time they woke up until sundown. Then they would break their fast with kind of a lighter meal after sundown. And this practice of fasting 2 days a week by the Jewish people, by the time Jesus is on the scene, gets adopted by the early church. They actually fast for 2 days a week, from the time they wake up till sundown. Then they break the fast with a kind of a lighter meal, and they do this on different days than the Jewish people were doing it, because they want to honor who Jesus is and what he experienced. And so they do it on their fast on Wednesday from the time they wake up until sundown, because on Wednesday, their understanding was that was the day that Jesus was betrayed. Now, we know he was betrayed Thursday night in the garden, right? But Judas takes the money on Wednesday. So they honor Wednesday as the day that Jesus was kind of stabbed in the back. He was betrayed by Judas when Judas took the money to betray Jesus. And then they fasted on Friday because that was the day that Jesus was crucified. So as a regular practice in the life of the church for well over 1,000 years, many Christians practice fasting on Wednesdays and Fridays till sundown. There's an ancient text that's called the Didache. And the Didache is not scripture. However, it gives some great insight into what was life like for the people of God. Now, the book of Acts is great for learning what the early church was like. The Didache was written right around the same time within the lifetime of most of the apostles, AD 80 to AD 110. And the Didache gives instruction for various things, like how they practiced communion or what they did on the Lord's Day and different things like that. And one of the things that the Didache talks about, it's not a long document, but it talks about how they fasted. And in the Didache, there was basically instruction that went like this, but let not your fast be with the hypocrites. So he's talking about the Jewish people, but especially the Pharisees, right? And how they fasted to be seen by people. Matthew, he's pointing out this passage we just looked at, Matthew 6:16. For they fast on the 2nd and the 5th day of the week, but fast on the 4th day, which is Wednesday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Sunday, the 1st day of the week, and on preparation day or Friday, atonement day. And so the Christians in the early church, they practiced this habit of fasting 2 days a week from the time they woke up until sundown. Then they broke the fast with a light meal on those days. And they did it to honor Jesus. As you go forward in the life of the church, around the year 300 or so, there's the I just lost a term. I got to look at my notes. I lost a term. I know what it is. The Council of Nicaea. There we go. And at the Council of Nicaea, there was the implementation of like a 40-day fast, which became known as Lent. Anybody heard of Lent before? So Lent, we always think about, that's a Catholic practice, whatever. Well, yes and no. It got started a long time ago around the 300s after Jesus. And the practice of Lent began as a 40-day fast. So what they would do is they would fast from the time they woke up until sundown every day. Then they would have a meal, right, a light meal after, and they would do that for the 40 days leading up to Easter, when Jesus' resurrection. Later, it got moved and changed to a practice of almost like abstinence or abstaining from various things, right? So I'm not going to eat sweets, or I'm not going to eat meat, or I'm not going. In today's world, I'm gonna fast from or abstain from social media, or I'm gonna whatever it might be. But originally, it was a 40-day fast. Time you got up until sundown, each day, 40 days leading up to the resurrection of Jesus. Another practice that the church did for a long, long time was fasting for 40 hours between Jesus' death on Friday and his resurrection on Sunday. So that the time period in between, people would fast to identify with Jesus bodily and his death and resurrection. And so for almost 1,500 years in the life of the church, fasting was a regular routine and habit and practice of the church. And like I said, today it still is in many of the eastern streams of the church, whether that's the Eastern Orthodox Church, Coptic Christians in Egypt practice fasting, the Dalit in India practice fasting, in Iran they practice fasting, the Christians do, Africa as well, many of the Christians there, the entire church practice fasting to begin the new year. In fact, that's one of the practices that's actually kind of made its way over here, where churches are starting to adopt that, a practice of prayer and fasting for the first so many days of the year, whatever that might be. It's one of the few ways that we see the practice of fasting happening. So why do you share all that, Bob? I share all that to say that fasting has a long and rich history in the life of the church, and has many, many benefits have come from it in our relationships to God, the move of God around the world. And it is one of the most essential and powerful of all the practices of Jesus, but arguably, it's the single most neglected practice here in the modern church in the West.